Hello, welcome back to Average Gamer Plays Factorio. This is a special episode in the series. It's the last episode in the series, and it's a base tour. And a bit of a potted history of the base as well, because I'm just going to talk about how it grew and how and why it all came to be. So I started this world after upgrading my computer at the end of last year. I bought a new processor and memory, and I wanted to see if it would be powerful enough to play the game and record the gameplay at the same time, and I think as it's turned out it is, because I've got to the end. I've still got the original crash site, as you can see here. I might have picked up one or two pieces accidentally. There's even still an iron plate in there that I never even bothered picking up. I've only just noticed that. So let's put down my Spidertron and get in. So this is the site of the starter base, and there's still a few remnants of the original stone patch. There was, I think over here there was original coal and iron, and there's even still the original brick smelter with the stone furnaces, the yellow inserters, the yellow belts. That has never ever been upgraded, that smelting array for the stone, for the brick. The other smelting arrays were in this position. They've been upgraded from brick to all the other different furnaces, to electric furnaces now. So there's still a fair amount of spaghetti in this base leading onto the main bus. I've never felt the need to actually change this or fix it or completely redesign it, because it works, and if it works it doesn't need fixing, in my opinion. I don't like changing things just for the sake of... I'm much more of a function over form sort of person. I'll build something so that it works. I don't really spend too much time and attention sort of concentrating on whether it actually looks nice. I mean, little things like this underground belt comes out to there. There must have been another belt going up there for something, that this must have been going underneath at some point. So there's little sort of remnants of old builds sort of lying about, and there might still be some yellow belts here and there. Certainly some mixture of red and blues here. So when I started this series, I never intended it to be a tutorial. I think there was plenty of other tutorial series around. Anyway, this was just going to be a let's play, and I'm going to play the game in my own style. I'm going to explain what I'm doing as I'm doing it. I'm going to talk through my thought processes of how I actually design and build the factory and come up with the the designs to build each science and whatever. I decided I was going to try and use my own blueprints as much as possible. I'm not going to sort of copy and paste somebody else's factory design. Now, I did use other people's blueprints here and there. The solar panel array was somebody else's blueprint design. I'm using Catherine of Sky's building train, which you can see over there, because it does what it says on the tin and there's no reason to change it. And I'm using other people's designs for belt balancers. I just found a book of belt balancers, and I've been using that. Some of them work better than others. I've not been impressed with, I think the 7-4 balancer has got some flaws in it, but a lot of the others, and it was just like a book that's just got 1-1 up to 8-8 balancers, and anything over 8 I didn't bother with. I know that there are other balances available up to sort of 16 or 32 belts or whatever, but I haven't used any of those. Now, some of these other designs, because I have used other people's designs in other worlds in the past, and I'm very, very familiar with the layout of them, some of my designs may look very, very similar to those. For instance, the mall here starts out very, very similar layout to Catherine of Sky's mall, and this is because I've used this in other other builds in the past, and I like the logistics of it and the design and the way that it's fairly simple. But as I got more and more into the game and started researching more and more technologies, and needed to build the other items, I veered off into my own little mini malls here. So we've got one here: batteries, engines, low flying structures for bots. We've got over here logistics chests, we've got rails, signals, engines, locomotive wagons, we've got nuclear stuff up here. So the mall just kind of expanded into whatever space it was available to expand into, and for whatever purpose it needed to expand for. So it started out being sort of quite neat and tidy, and then it just expanded into, let's just put something somewhere to get it to work. And then once you get bots and you can request stuff, you don't even need to remember where it is. You're not running around picking stuff up, you're just requesting it. So it doesn't really matter what it looks like as long as it builds the stuff. And this does build the stuff. And in fact, I've only this is the mall that's built all the items for the whole base. So this there's only one like blue belt factory that has currently built 245,789 belts, and there's only one blue undergrounds factory and only one stack inserter factories and so on. So all the machines and all the smelters and all the belts and all the everything has just come out of, each one's just come from one assembly machine. Because I never really felt the need to sort of build anything faster. If I was sort of thinking about something and doing a design, it would build the stuff in the background, and it would by the time I needed stuff, it would be ready. I only very rarely had to wait for items to sort of get built before I could put down a large build. So the original design of this base was that I'd have the bus in the middle, and then sort of circuits on the left, and then I've got the labs, and then the science factories were up here, and I've taken them down and rebuilt them with beacon versions once I got beacon technology, and this is when I started scaling up. And so this is like a little science build that's just designed to do like 300 science a minute to go with that rocket silo over there. The original thing did extend a little bit further up when I was, in the pre-beacon days, because the builds had to be bigger. You needed more assemblers and more machines making the stuff. I ended up bringing in this extra copper train. The copper that I had coming in at the bottom on the 4 lines wasn't enough to power all the, or to feed all the factories once I started sort of scaling up to 300 science a minute, so it wasn't enough to make all the low density structures and things like that. So I basically went to another copper mine. There was another copper mine here which has now been mined out, and it's all gone. No, there it was, pretty much mined out. So I was mining from this patch over here, smelting it and just bringing the plates into the top of the factory. And then this mine was originally put in for powering this, or feeding this module factory here. So this is where I was building. This is the first sort of large build that I did when I was scaling up to mega base. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So yeah, the starter base is still there. This is still the original ore patch that I mined in the very, very early days, and it's still going. And I've got a set of trains coming in, bringing in. So once I started mining out the local iron and copper patches, I started using these trains. So there's an iron patch down here, which again, this is the one that I moved to, and the one that I'm still using now, and it's still got plenty. It's starting to, some of these mines, you can see how big this patch was to start with. It kind of stretched all the way down here. And this one was all the way out there. So there was like 70 something million in there when I started mining it, and there's 35 million in there now, so it's about half empty. And then I've been through a couple of other copper patches. There was one here that I was bringing stuff in from, and there was one over here that I was mining and using for the solar panel build, and now I'm using a copper patch down there. So yeah, but it's still, you know, I'm bringing stuff in on the trains, and I'm using sort of 1-4 trains on this side of the build and then 3-8 trains on the other side, so 3 logos and 8 wagons. So this was my starter base, and when I started thinking about scaling up, I was thinking about how best to power it. So I'd had a couple of nuclear plants here powering this starter base. Now I could have carried on with nuclear, but I've heard that for mega basing, solar is more the way to go. And I've never really done a build with a big solar panel field on it before, so I thought, right, well, let's give that a go. So I decided that I would pretty much draw an imaginary line down the middle, basically where this train line is, and then to the left of it I would have my solar panels. Let's just take off the electric, so I've got all these solar panels, and then to the right of it I would build the base. Now this big old empty space here is where I started, where I did my first version of my 5k mega base, and it didn't work, and I'll get onto that a bit later as well. So yeah, I decided that I would go. I'd done a 1k base before, and I already had the blueprints for all the factories that I designed for that sort of squirreled away, and I thought, well, I could do a 1k base, but I'd like to sort of try and do something a little bit more adventurous, or a little bit more of a challenge. So I decided to go straight to a 5k base and see what would happen, see how far I would get. I didn't even know if my computer was even capable of running a 5k base, so it was been an interesting challenge whether it worked or not. Now the first design that I came up with, I was thinking about how to lay out the rails, and I've seen a lot of city block designs, and I knew that they worked, but I wanted to do something a little bit more sort of visually interesting. So I came up with an octagon design, and if we scroll over to my current mega base, you can see sort of how this looks. If I turn the power back on, the octagons kind of stand out a lot more. So I've got an octagon, and then with the way that the octagons are designed, in between each one is a square. Now in this version of the base, I'm not using the squares for anything. In the original version with the smaller octagons, and let me just show you how much smaller the octagons were. If I go on to, it's called large octagon on the blueprint, but it's not a large octagon at all. It is much smaller. If we just zoom in on the utility science build, and I overlay this small octagon over the large one, you'll see how much bigger the large octagon is now from what I originally started with. And you can also see how the factories were designed to fit in with this smaller octagon size. So if you're looking around the base and sort of see, you know, production science, there's all this empty space around the edge. That's because it was designed to fit into this smaller octagon. And the problem that I had with this smaller octagon was that there was too little space between the junctions for the trains to stop. It's not immediately obvious on this particular blueprint, but once I started putting junctions in the middle, like here we've got an entrance here and an exit over there, once I'd put these middle junctions in on the octagon and a train was sort of queuing to wait, you know, waiting to get in, it was blocking the next junction along, and it just basically caused a lot of gridlock, basically. And I was also building, I was using the squares for other little builds. I'd put a couple of smelters into a square, and I'd put, you know, maybe some oil processing, and I had a rail sort of border going around the edge, and I was using some of these half octagons for something. You know, I had a plastic factory, I think, in one of them, and it all turned out that I was actually having too much traffic going round and waiting to get in and get out of each junction because all the junctions were too close together. And I didn't realise this was actually, you know, how big a problem was until I'd actually designed and built the entire factory, and I got it to test. I got it launching rockets, I got it to doing some research, and then I was still getting lots and lots of congestion. I thought, there's no way this is going to run for hours on end without any attention. So I decided to tear the whole thing down. It was taking up all this amount of space here. There's still a few little bits here. There's, you know, some of the builds were actually sort of outside the factory walls, kind of thing. It was the idea was that I would mine all the ore patches outside the factory, and I would smelt at the edges, and then I would do the manufacturing and the science research getting towards the middle. Now, once I realised that I couldn't actually squeeze the smelters into these squares and use up all the space, I actually started building rows of smelters on the outside. So I had the sort of factories inside the octagons, and then had smelters on the outside and the steel plant on the outside, and it started looking a little bit haphazard and not very well organised, basically. So when I took the opportunity to tear it down and rebuild it, I did a little bit of a rethink, and I came up with, you know, I thought, well, I'll put some, you know, 8 smelters together inside an octagon, and I'll have a set of trains coming in, and if I needed more smelting, I probably would need more smelting, I'd just be able to build more smelting arrays elsewhere. So I've got one down there, I've got one over there, and I've got one up here. I've actually just got 3 of these smelting arrays. So one at the bottom left, one at the middle right, and one at the top right. Yeah, I've got the tags on here. They were just scroll down a little bit more. Let's just turn the electrics off. So the idea behind this base design was that I would have, yeah, the ores coming in from the edge. So I've got a mine here with a depot, and the idea was that this depot, I'm using LTN for the train, so LTN sends the train to a depot where it can be refueled. So I've got the depots around the edge, and this depot would pick up ore from these mines and take it to these smelters. And then this depot would pick up plates from the smelters and deliver it to the factories. So I'd have depots outside handling the mines and depots inside handling the factories. Well, that was the idea anyway. So I'd have smelting around the edge and circuits around the edge, and then as you get closer and closer to the middle, you start getting more into the sciences. So I've got the rocket launch pad here, surrounded by, so that's mostly white science, and I've got red and green science here because they're small enough builds. I've merged them together into one. So I've got red, green, blue, yellow and purple science, and then I've got rocket fuel and low density structures and the labs. So all these sciences and all the labs are kind of, you know, all the sciences are in a circle around the labs, and then there's things like the steel, and there's more electronic circuits and more red circuits and plastics and smelting, and that's all sort of in a next layer on the outside of that. And then I've got the mines on the very outside of that. So it's all like an onion layer kind of thing, with the research labs being in the middle and everything else sort of radiating around that. And that has worked very, very well. And you know, once I'd redesigned the base and got the train lines set up in such a way that the stations, the trains wouldn't block each other when they were queuing to get into a station, it worked a lot better. And something else that's worked a lot better is actually not using as many trains as I did before. Now there's still an awful lot of trains whizzing around here, but what I mean is that The low density structure factory was very greedy for copper plate. So there was a lot of trains going around trying to deliver copper plate to this low density structure factory, and then because of that there was twice as many trains trying to deliver copper ore to the smelters. And this was causing such a huge amount of traffic that it was clogging everything else up. And even on this larger base design, it was still, I was running out of trains and it was still doing too much. So I decided to have a rethink and a rebuild, and I tore down the low density structure factory and I rebuilt it with just this simpler supply system where I just have a whole row of smelters that would get their ores directly down the belts from a set of mines. And that has actually worked a lot better because it's cut down on the traffic a lot. I'm able, the low density structures have got a steady stream of, I mean, I'm still getting the plastic and the steel coming in on the trains, but we've got a steady stream of copper coming in and I've got a steady stream of low density structures going out. And I did a similar sort of thing with the plastics. On the old base I had a lot of trouble with the oil. Waiting for oil trains, fluid trains to fill up with oil and take them around and deliver them. So the plastic factory that I had was getting starved of crude oil and it wasn't producing as much plastic as it should. So this one, when I built it, I thought, right, I'll build the plastic factory near some oil deposits. And obviously the more I went away from the origin, the richer the deposits get. Actually, when I decided to go to a mega base, I did use a mod to change the world generation settings. So for any new unexplored terrain, it would have a richer, more frequent ore provision than the original starter base did. And yeah, I made a copy of the world. I used this mod to change the world settings. I used some console commands to reveal the map, and I sort of wandered around and had a look at how big the ore patches were at a reasonable distance. I didn't want to sort of get in a train and just go, 30 minutes away. I didn't want to go that far. But yeah, certainly coming out here, these ore patches were going to be sort of big enough and frequent enough that if one patch got mined out, I didn't have to go too far to find another one. So that worked well for me. So with this plastic build, I decided that I would build it near a sizable ore deposit, and I would just pipe it in. So I've just got these little blue dots here are oil pipes, and if we turn the things on, you can see where I've got the pumps to just keep it all going. And this is working very well. We've got plenty of oil coming in, we've got plenty of plastic going out, nothing, and in fact I've got so all these pipes down here, I built them and I went from the oil field to the factory, and then when I wired everything up I didn't need these, so I put down a whole set of pipes down here at the end that were just surplus to requirements. But as and when these run out, I can just tap into these and I've just got a load more oil. But these are still pretty full anyway, because all the mining productivity applies to the oil as well. And even then I discovered that this plastic factory still wasn't building enough plastic to feed the entire factory, so I built a second one. And then when I built the second one, not only was I getting the oil from some local deposits, there's some coming up here and some from down here, but I'm also getting the coal straight from a patch there. So I'm not even bringing trains into this factory at all. There's just trains going out for the plastic, but no trains delivering in here at all. And I think once we get to the stage where there's enough mining productivity that you think, well, okay, I'm only planning on building this base and running it, see if I can get it to run for 10 hours. It's not like it's got to run for 5 years or something. So it's not like I needed billions of ore. So I thought that just mining some local resources, and I did a similar thing when I had to build an overflow low density structure factory. I would just get the copper ore from a local patch there instead of bringing it in from elsewhere. There's nothing overly complicated about the base, I don't think. There's nothing terribly clever with circuits, or I'm not using bots for anything really. I'm using bots for the recycling. This is about the only sort of clever, in quotes, thing that I'm using is the LTN system. I've got a few helper mods for that. Let's get in the train and head over to the new base, and I can show you. Where is my train? It's over there. And let's head over to a random station. Electronic circuits will do. Now while I'm bopping about on the train, because that's going to take a few minutes, I will talk a little bit more about... So I've got a separate factory here making solar panels and accumulators. So this is completely sort of separate from everything else. It's got its own little oil for the sulfuric acid for the batteries. It's mining its own, well, it was mining its own copper from here. I mean, that's been mined out, but it had its own iron patch. And I was just making the solar panels and the accumulators completely separate from everything else. Now I was bringing in, I had a train sort of bringing in the roboports and the substations. They were still being made in the mall. And I had a little sort of exchange thing going on. So the mall would take over roboports and substations, and then the solar panel factory would send back solar panels and accumulators for this to put into the satellite for the rocket over here. So this satellite here gets its stuff from, bots feed this in, and then when there's stocks in here run out, it'll go and the train will refill with it's this train over here. It's over at the other base, the solar panel side. So I'm loading up roboports and substations, and I'm unloading solar panels and accumulators. So that was like a completely separate build, self-contained and not getting in the way of anything else. And then this module factory is another separate build, self-contained and not getting in the way of anything else. When I designed this, it's basically a green circuit factory build plugged into a red circuit factory build, plugged into a blue circuit factory build, plugged into a module build, and they're all separate things that are just linked together with belts. There's nothing, it's not like it's one large thing. Well, I mean, it is one large factory, but it's not like one single unit. It's like 4 separate units connected together with belts. And I found this a lot easier to design and build and work out where the bottlenecks were. I mean, I've got another little, the plastic factory down here. I've got some coal liquefaction going on here, making the sulfuric acid for the blue circuits and some plastic. And was it doing anything else? It was maybe sort of, iron for the plates. So that is the module factory feeding from iron, coal and copper, and then this copper was the original one, and then that one was the secondary one when this one started running out, and even then that one's starting to get seriously mined out as well. And then the modules were the bots were loading them onto this train, and then the train had some the schedule where it would leave when it had 500 speed modules and 250 prod modules, and it would leave when either of them had been emptied out. So even if I only needed speed modules in the base, it would just keep going around and refilling with speed modules, and even if there was still prod modules sort of left on the wagon, that didn't matter. It would still go forwards and backwards, and that has been running quite nicely because every time I've needed modules, they've just been there. And I think I've got the I don't know if I'll be able to show it directly on the map view. Let's just zoom in. Should have showed this one. I was actually there. Circuit condition here. No, it's got disabled by controlled behaviour. It just basically only unloads the wagon if there's less than so many in stock, which is a bog standard circuit condition. So this train will sit here until I actually, you know, take some modules away and use them for building or whatever. And then when it's empty, it'll just go back to the factory and get some more. So let's have a look at, so I've got to get out the train, cross over the track, because of the way that I've got these tracks going round in a sort of clockwise direction. Every time I get out the train, I'm on the wrong side of it. I can't get out the train on this side and just walk straight into the factory. I always get out the train and I've got to walk in front of it. But I've got in the habit of always getting in the Spidertron, because that way I don't get run over and I can walk straight over everything. So I was going to show you the LTN combinators, because I had a couple of mods that helped me with the LTN. So, and one of them was this LTN Combinator mod, and what that does is it lets you craft a separate item, an LTN combinator, which is just a constant combinator with an electronic circuit. And then when you click on this, you get an easy user interface. I mean, the combinator works the same way as the normal one does. But instead of just putting these items into a combinator and then programming them individually, you can just program them directly on this user interface. And I found that a lot easier to actually get everything set up and make sure it was all configured properly. So that's just a little helper mod for the combinator settings. The other mod that I'm using is this LTN Manager. I found this more useful sort of as development has gone on. You can sort of list all the depots and stations. You can see what you've got in stock, what's being requested, what's in transit. You can see a history of all the shipments. You can see that this save has now been going for 741 hours. There's only 99 episodes, I think, in the series, so I've edited most of this 741 hours out. Alerts is, you know, you can see where things have been going wrong, and it's mainly just sort of remaining cargo, which is things leaving a station with items still in the train. Now I'm getting around that by using, again, another LTN related mod called LTN Cleanup, I think it's called, and it allows you to build recycling stations. Now I don't know why that train is still sitting there with nothing in it, so let's send that back to the station. So you name this station. Right, here's the train coming in with some spare green circuits on. The bots will come along and empty these green circuits into this set of chests over here, requester chests. So the idea is that the LTN trains are set to only spend 2 minutes at a station, and after 2 minutes they will leave. And if they've still got items on them when they leave, they come here. And you set up a station, you name it with this icon to be a cleanup station, and then you give it the icons of all the items that you want it to handle. And I've got 2 stations for this because they're this one and this one are both the drop-off stations, and then each one of these is a pickup station. So this one will be recycled copper ore, and then we've got recycled copper plate, and these are set on the combinators. Again, I can't zoom in and show you until I'm actually sort of there, but these are set on the, if I open this combinator again, it's basically just set to have a higher request priority, and the I think I've set the request threshold to be like 4,000. So as soon as there's 4,000 items in that recycle station, so there's a train coming in to pick up some recycled sulfuric acid. So there's plenty of red circuits being dropped off over here. I don't know why this train has come back with so many red circuits on it, but basically we're getting 10,000 red circuits being emptied off the train and going into these chests. Now the next time a train needs to deliver some red circuits, it will come here first and pick these up before going to the actual red circuit factory. And we've got some green circuits being dropped off there, and we've got 2,200. So a train won't come here until there's 4,000 in these chests. Well, let's see how close we actually get. 3, 5, 6, 7. So there's 4,000 there now. Now we'll just have to wait for another delivery to see if it'll send a train here first. I'm pretty sure it will. I've got to wait for the light to go green. Oh, yes, there you go. That light's just gone yellow. So it's sending a train over here to pick up these green circuits. So the stuff never stays in the recycling plant for long. Especially if it's something that's used quite frequently. So the LTN system is sending a train over here, and then it'll empty out all these green circuits onto the train because there's only 10,000 or so of them. And this one's picking up the blue circuits. So there's my recycling plant emptied out of greens and blues, and then we've got 10,000 red circuits in there. So next time we need some red circuits, we'll send a train here first. So that system has been working very, very well. There's not a lot, you know, anything that gets a train leaves with any items, it will send it over to the recycling plant. And I've got a couple of other recycling plants dotted about for slightly different items because I couldn't get all the items onto the same plant, because I kind of built it up bit by bit, and then if there wasn't enough room to send it to one recycling centre, I just built another recycling plant. So I've got this one here just doing low density structures, rocket fuel, coal, sulphur and brick, none of which are actually recycled at the other plant. So again, similar idea. As soon as there's more than, so there's only 240 rocket fuel in there, as soon as there's 4,000 in there or something, or maybe even just 1,000 or 500, because the train for rocket fuel only holds 3,200, so it might be that as soon as there's 1,000 in there, it'll send a train for it. But that just keeps the items moving and keeps the trains moving and ensures that everything does actually get used up. Now, one thing that I am doing, one lesson that I learned, is to always use stack filter inserters to make sure that you're only unloading the right items off the train. Each train is only supposed to have one item on it, but if you don't set up the recycling plants properly, or don't have things all set up 100% perfectly, then it is possible for a train to arrive in a station with 2 items on it and you get contamination on the line. And I have had this issue to contend with a few times. So stack filter inserters everywhere, they are a godsend, and make sure that your trains are emptied out as well before they go back to the depots. That's another godsend. So again, the actual factories themselves, they're all designed in a sort of I went into a sandpit or sandbox world to do the design, and I started out just working out how many factories I would need to output 5,000 a minute, and it says okay, you need sort of 52 point something. So I thought, right, well that's close enough to 54, and that's the, you know, you can do that in a nice neat grid, because I'd settled on this 12 beacon design because you end up getting more stuff out for the amount that you put in. Well, you certainly get it out quicker anyway. So you know, I'd build a number of factories to, and I'd use like the infinity loaders or whatever in the sandbox world to just give me all the, you know, full belts of all the ingredients, and then I'd see how many factories I need to make the final product, and then I'd see how many factories I'd make for each ingredient, and I'd see how many factories I make for the next ingredient, and so on. And when I got like each sub-factory, I would just sort of bolt it together with the belts. So again, it's a combination. You can see here on the design, it's one set of factories doing this, and one factory doing that, and then this factory, and then that factory, and that factory, and then this one, and they're all sort of feeding in. So this one does the gears and the pipes, and that feeds into this, and this one does the engines, and that feeds into there, and that one does the electric engines, and that feeds into there. So it's all separate factories, each doing their own little thing, outputting onto a belt and then importing onto the next factory. So it's not like, there's not an awful lot of sort of direct insertion going on here. It's all, everything's going out onto a belt and then through inserters and back in on another belt. And I did pay attention. Eventually I started realizing that these, you could get away with just doing red belts and blue inserters. It didn't always, just because it was a mega base, it didn't always have to be blue belts and green inserters. You could still get away with some of the lower end items, and I could probably get away with some of the lower end items on some of the smelting arrays, to be honest, because that was like one of the early builds I never really got round to editing or changing. So again, the electronic circuits is basically just sort of 8 factories, you know, mashed together. Each one has its own input of iron and copper, and then inputs into a balancer onto the train. It has gone through a few stages of evolution, but it's still, you know, mainly in terms of you know, balancing the trains before feeding the factory. Because initially, when this build was fitting into the old octagon, the smaller octagon design, it was a little bit narrower, and I actually had 4 belts, each train unloaded onto 4 belts. Each half of the train unloaded onto 4 belts, and then the top 4 wagons would go to one set of assemblers, and then the bottom 4 wagons would feed the other half of the assemblers. And if they weren't being fed evenly, or there was an error in one of the builds, which is what I noticed on this green circuit factory, there was an error, and one set of builds, one set of factories just wasn't making anything, so I was only emptying half the train. So I decided, once I'd moved into this new octagon design and I had more space to play with, I would make the stations a little bit further apart and balance everything properly. And then I had a comment from a viewer who said, well, why don't you just merge, you know, rotate one of the factories and have both factories feeding the same train? Because I had 4 factories feeding 4 output trains, and it was just taking a long time to load a train up. So he said, well, why don't you feed the train from both sides? So I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll turn that round, tear it down, rebuild it, put it back. Now, talking of tearing down and rebuilding, when I tore down my original mega base, which was again occupying this whole area here, I built this. Oh, there's not even on the radar. Right, let's head back to it. My storage area. Now, even then, I'm noticing there's occasional little errors with the doubling up on the power poles. This is because the left side and the right side of the blueprint aren't 100% accurate to each other. I did redesigned the signalling on the junctions, and when I put the blueprint down again, it has duplicated, or some of the signals are in slightly different places to where they were before, so it's just put down new signals. But I've only just noticed that so extra signals on there doesn't really make a difference, extra power poles on there doesn't really make a difference, but what would make a difference is the fact that there's a train line missing from there. So it means that the train can't actually sort of get in or get out. It's the train getting out. So these trains coming out would always go on this. I mean, I've never noticed a problem with that. But yeah. Now I don't know whether using 4 lines is hugely sort of beneficial. There's still some extra signals on here. I could go around and sort of delete some of these duplicates. I'm not setting anything up to actually swap the trains on the tracks, because I've heard that actually slows down production if I have little crossovers. So once a train goes onto an outside lane, it kind of stays on the outside lane, and I think if the outside lane is busy, then it'll use the next lane in, but it sort of paths to get to the destination, but it'll either choose to go on the outside lane all the way or the second lane in all the way. And it seems to be working fine. So let's go back to, I'm now calling it Mega Base Storage, but this was like a halfway house, and it was called halfway house for a long time. Where when I was dismantling the old base, I would take all the construction materials, all the belts and the assemblers and the inserters and the beacons and the speed modules, and just put them into a whole bunch of chests that was in between where the old base was and the new base was going to be. And then all the items that I'd manufactured, like the green circuits or the red circuits and some of the plates and the plastic and things like that, I would send back on a train back to the starter base to be recycled and reused over there. So I set up a if we have a look, so yeah, this was the my Mega Base Storage, and I've taken down a lot of these chests. I mean, I had dozens of these yellow chests when it was full of stuff, but I've put it all down and rebuilt everything. But the idea is, if I, and I just throw everything into this provider chest, and then the bots just stick it into storage. They'll just put it all away for me, and I don't need to care where anything is. I'll just request it, and the bots will bring it to me. I just throw everything into there, and the bots put it all away. They keep everything tidy. I might put everything away now, since I'm not going to be building anything else. But yeah, I sent stuff back to be recycled, and I built this recycling plant or recycling station down here. So again, the trains would unload into purple chests, and then the bots would load items onto whichever line was requesting it. So this line here was requesting green circuits, and that was green circuits, and this line here was also, so yeah, 3 lines here for green circuits up there. That line was requesting red circuits, this line was requesting copper plate, this line was requesting copper plate again, plastic down there at the bottom. So these lines would then go through, these electric circuit lines would go up and sort of filter up and around and merge in with the priority on there with the output from an existing green circuit factory, and then these lines would sort of go round here and merge in with the output from this green circuit factory. So everything that I'd sent back from my abandoned mega base would get used up first, And it didn't actually take long, to be honest, to reuse them. The base this starter base uses about 6,000 green circuits a minute or something. So even if I was sending back kind of 200,000 that I'd had in a set of chests, it certainly didn't take long to use them all up. So a lot of stuff came back here to be recycled. A lot of stuff just went into storage over here to be reused on building trains and rebuilt. And then the rest of the stuff I just ended up deleting. So I wrote myself a small mod called Item Eraser. So this is a little mod of my own creation, and I wrote this based on or I intended it for use in the sandbox world when I was designing and testing the builds, and if I wanted to clear all the lines out and all the factories and to start again, I could just use this Item Eraser mod to clear some lines. And what it does, well, it does what it says on the tin basically. If you have items in a chest that you no longer need, let's just find some other little items in here. Well, it doesn't really matter because I've got some wood in that chest. I just swipe Item Eraser over it and it just deletes them. And it will delete items off belts, and it will delete items out of wooden chests and steel chests. It might do iron chests as well. It doesn't delete items out of logistics chests because I didn't want to accidentally swipe over anything and just delete everything that you've got in stock. And at the moment it doesn't delete items off out of railway wagons or out of assembly machines. So if I want to clear down a factory, and I found this actually quite useful when dismantling the old base, because I would send some items over to be recycled, and then we got down to like a few hundred or a few thousand plates or ores or whatever left over. I just deleted those. It was just the equivalent of, you know, Minecraft's idea of just throwing something in a lake and then 5 minutes later it despawns. It's just like, I don't need this anymore. Or throwing it in a furnace and deleting the items, you know. So I didn't see that as being overly cheaty. You know, I mean, if you're doing it properly, you just build a whole bunch of wooden chests, because there's plenty of wood and trees being deconstructed to make the factory. You just build yourself hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of wooden chests and just throw all the items in there and just forget about them. Well, rather than just littering the landscape with loads of chests, I just decided to put them into a few chests and delete the items and then take the chests up. So there's that. I might still do a bit more work on this Item Eraser mod and build in a user interface for it to sort of, you can click options and say, well, I want it to delete out of wagons and factories but not off belts, or I want it to delete these items but not those items. At the moment it will just delete any item that's on a belt and any item that's in a chest, but it won't care about which item it is. And it might still leave items on the if an inserter is holding something, it'll keep that item. So, you know, you clear some stuff out and then you'll find that there's a few little dregs sort of ending up going back onto the belts again. But it's useful for tearing down and rebuilding. You don't need to worry too much about sort of keeping all the items that you're creating. You can just delete them, and because when the base gets to this kind of size, smelting a few more plates is neither here nor there. So I wasn't bothered about keeping some of the cheaper items. More expensive items like low density structures and even rocket fuel to some extent, then yes, I did sort of try and keep as much of those as possible, but the cheaper items I was quite happy to just erase those and get rid of them. And then it helped a lot when trying to clear out contamination. If I had multiple items on a belt or going into a furnace, then I'd just decide it might be quicker, rather than just spend ages trying to tidy it all up. I'd just erase everything on that smelting array and then just make sure that the train unloaded the correct items next time round. So yeah, when I was dismantling them all, or dismantling the old base, I would send sort of most of the items over to be recycled, and then it would go to the last sort of few dregs. I'd probably just erase those. But yeah, all the circuits I recycled, and the plastics and some of the more expensive items. So So yeah, what else can I say? What else can I say? Now, yeah, some of the pitfalls of using somebody else's blueprints is that I didn't notice that there's a little error or a little quirk with this blueprint for the solar panel array. So if we have a look at the blueprint, now the original design looks fine and it's got the right kind of ratio of solar panels to accumulators, but the way the blueprint is designed with these accumulators sticking out, they're useful as little sort of pegs to line up the next build so that everything tiles together. But it means that when you put another one down next to it, it overwrites some of those accumulators, and it doesn't. The more you put down this build, the worse the ratio gets, basically, because the accumulators, it just has fewer accumulators for the amount of solar panels. And I discovered that this was never powering the factory overnight, and it was because there just wasn't enough accumulators in the thing to provide enough electricity for an overnight storage, overnight use. So I had to put down basically banks and banks and banks of extra accumulators, about sort of 6, 7, 8,000 of them or something like that. But we are now generating enough power. That is charging up, so it's daytime. Yeah, so we've got enough power now to see us through the night. And if we have a look at the power, I think the base use is about 32 gigawatts, and we're producing 3.3 terajoules, which is 1 gigawatt per second. So I think we've got enough. In fact, while I've been wittering away and talking about all this, let's just have a look at the production over the last 10 hours and see if it's still holding. And it is, because it's been doing all this production while we've been talking, or while I've been talking. And that is a very, very steady line indeed, without any major, you know, I can't really zoom in too much on that. If you have a look on the last hour, in fact, it's anything steady and it goes up a little bit. That's interesting. It's sort of quite steady and then it actually goes up a little bit rather than dipping a little bit. But it certainly doesn't look like we're running out of power like we used to. So we've got plenty of power to see us through the night. We've got plenty of items to see things through at the moment, considering, you know, it says that we're not getting enough electronic circuits. I think we're just about borderline. We're just about making enough electronic circuits to sort of see us through. But yeah, everything is working as it should. I mean, as I said, all the factories are fairly basic things. If we just have a look at the logistic and automation factories, you know, we've got the items coming off the trains, and then this is what I mean about the original. So this was the original train design, thinking that I'd have to squeeze it all into a smaller octagon. So I thought I'd need as much space in the middle for the factories, and then have as little space as possible taken up by train stations. So there's a set of, I'll zoom in somewhere else. Yeah, that's a similar sort of thing to load up. So there's like 4 lines here going into basically these 4 wagons, and then another 4 lines at the top coming in, and then the loading stations are just this in reverse. And then they come out and then they are balanced outside of the train lines situation. So all these iron lines come together, and well, 4 of them from each train sort of come, and you know, this is from this might be 4 lines from one train and 4 lines from the other train. I can't quite remember until we've rolled it all back, but it is being balanced. So it comes off the train first, and then it's being balanced, and then it goes into the factories. And again, the factories are sort of modular. So I've got, you know, a few lines here making the gears, and a few lines making the belts, and a few lines making the inserters, and then that goes into the green circuits. And they're all, you know, just separate factories linked together by belts, and that's the way that I'm doing it all over the place. 64,000 on the train, I believe, because they stacked to 200. These trains taking the science packs to the factory, these aren't LTN trains, these are just straightforward vanilla, wait till full, go to the drop off, wait till empty, and I've got 2 trains on each line, so I've got 2 for red, 2 for green, 2 for blue, whatever. Because that's nice and simple, because these stations, the science packs only ever need to go from here to the labs. So I've got the train here waiting to still finally sort of emptying the last few dregs. 400, yeah, so when this train comes out there's one waiting right behind it, and then by the time that second train is emptied, then this first train will be waiting behind it to fill it up again. So as long as I am making the science, and when I designed the factories it was a little bit borderline. I was designing it just to do 5,000 science a minute, and I should have really designed it to do 5,500 just to be, you know, just so that I have a comfortable buffer. Now it does seem to be, I mean, it may be that I've got a little bit of a comfortable buffer, because let's just see, wait for this train to go out, there it goes, and then there should be another one right behind it. There it comes. So we're not running out of yellow signs there at all. Yeah, let's just have another little look at the production. If anything, these are consuming at maybe a slightly higher rate than we're producing there. Interesting. We'll see if, you know, it might be if I keep this running for another 20 or 30 hours, it will start running out. But it's at the moment we're still pretty much in a situation where we're producing and consuming at the same rate, and all these lines here are full, and all these labs are busy, and we're halfway through, or a third of the way through mining prod 172, which takes 422,000 of each item, so we need to launch a fair number of rockets. Now, talking of launching rockets, I haven't actually shown you this in this base tour yet. Let's just have a look at some rockets being launched. And while we're watching the rockets being launched, yes, we can hear them in the background. I think it's just because we're zoomed in on the yeah, we're zoomed in, and we'll zoom out a bit and we'll make that a bit quieter. So let me count up again how many rockets we're launching. 4043. 3785. 3601. 3518. 2885. 4230. That's 22,062 rockets on this mega base, plus a few more on the original version of the mega base, which I never actually kept a record of. I might have to go back through my old videos and see if I kept a note of anything before I dismantled it. Plus however many rockets we've launched over at this side. And there goes another one. 7294. 29,356 rockets. So I can reasonably confidently say that this base has probably launched somewhere in the region of 30,000 rockets. And it's still doing so very successfully. I mean, these mines are starting to, some of them are starting to run out a little bit, but there's still plenty of, you know, there's still 28 million copper in there. That used to be a decent sized patch at the starter base days, isn't it? 102 million down to 86. So yeah, the steel factories just take the iron ore and then smelt it straight in through iron plate and straight into steel plate and back out again. So that's nice and simple. One ingredient in, one ingredient out. When I got to about mining prod 120, I started mining directly onto trains just to see if it would work. And yeah, that train does seem to be loading up reasonably quickly. I mean, it might not be as quick as if I was loading up from chests, but you know, it's now this train is loading up a little bit slower because these mining drills here have run out, so this last wagon is only being filled up off this one drill. So you can see that just being loading up like that. So that'll sit there for a little bit longer and load up, but the other train has already sort of been in and gone out, so it doesn't take long. And then mining directly onto the trains is really easy to set up, because there's almost no building. You know, actually building a mine and setting up all the trains and all the belts and everything else is a little bit tedious and time consuming. It's far easier to just mine directly onto the train if you possibly can. But you know, I mean, with this level of mining productivity, you only need just over 2 miners, I think, to fill a belt. So even that one, though the belt is moving, it still says, you know, waiting for space in destination most of the time. It might occasionally sort of do something, but yeah, these mining drills are working, and then these are just picking up the slack. So we've still got loads and loads and loads of iron ore to come out of this patch. All 4 drills all 4 drills on that side are mined out. Not the end of the world. Yeah, I mean, it does what it says on the tin. It's a lot of very simple factories all just sort of plugged together doing their own little thing, and as long as you've got enough ingredients, enough mines and enough smelters and enough trains, and enough of a good infrastructure, you can always sort of build more. I mean, it's not going to be too difficult, because I'm getting these no station supplying electronic circuit messages, and it's not going to be too difficult for me to just build another electronic circuit factory, even if I have to build another octagon to put it in. It'll go in very easily, and if I need to build another smelting array and another depot and another set of mines to support it, then that is also going to be very easy. So it's not going to be too difficult to expand this kind of base design, because it's just lots and lots of separate little modules all doing their own little thing. And we're still sort of just about on the 60 UPS. It's dipping a little bit. I wouldn't really want to expand this base that much more, because I don't think my my computer will. It certainly wouldn't handle the 10,000 science per minute base, but I don't think I need to do that for anything. Yeah, that's it. It's a fairly simple, straightforward build. There's just lots of it. It's just nicely spread out. I mean, when I was doing the first version of the Mega Base, I walked around it in the Spidertron quite a lot, but on this one I've actually set up. Let's just make sure. Yeah, let's get in the train, and then I've set up all these passenger stations, one on each factory has got a passenger station, so I can get from A to B. I can get where I need to go to sort of do some maintenance or check supplies or fix something or whatever, and I use that train to get about, and that works very well. And this train that was just like a spare, you know, like a trash train. If I was yeah, dismantling something, and then yeah, I was using this. That's actually set to be request to chest. What are they requesting? They're not requesting anything at the moment, are they? I can't remember what I was using this train for now. Yeah, it's just called MISC train. Maybe I was using it just to bring myself some random extra bits and pieces if I needed some extra building materials or something. I can't remember. I cannot remember what that train was used for. It has been several hours since I used it. I don't have that many construction bots in the base. I think I've only ever built, if we have a look at the production statistics and have a look at everything that I have made, yeah, 1.1 billion electronic circuits, 500 million plastic, 300 million steel, 250 million red circuits, but I've only made, I think it's going to be down here somewhere, 9,900 construction bots and 8,000 logistics bots. So I've never been overly heavily dependent on construction bots, and most of those I think are over at the solar panel build, because I use the bots to build that. You could spend forever and a day looking at the statistics, but the main one is that production statistics, which I'm very, very happy with, because it means that I've achieved what I set out to do, which was to make a 5,000 science per minute base. And I will leave it on a shot of the rockets launching quite happily and feeding the science onto the trains. Sit here and enjoy watching those take off for ages, basically. So that's it. That is my 5,000 science a minute base. Nicely spread out, lots of space to work in. Nothing too clever or complicated about it. I think it's just a case of finding and fixing all the shortfalls and bottlenecks, and I'm still going to carry on and enjoy having fun with Factorio for a long time in the future, I'm sure. I'm going to have a little bit of a break from it now, but yeah, that's it, and I may or may not see you next time.